He was fair. He was honest. They painted him out as some kind of racist, or he was not. He was just a law and order guy from South Philly.
He was a tough guy.
He was tough.
Took no nonsense from people.
But he was fair, and he took care of his cops.
Welcome back to another episode of Cold Red. I'm Ray Carr, and with me always is Fitz. Our guest today is none other than Bill Fleisher. Bill has an extensive career in law enforcement, working within multiple agencies, and now is considered one of the foremost experts in polygraph training. Bill is also the Commissioner Emeritus of the VDOC Society, an organization both Jim and myself are members of as well. Bill, welcome to Cold Red. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Good to see you guys. I haven't seen you for so long, not even a week, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It's my relationship with Bill is one Thursday a month. We meet at the Union League in Philadelphia, and we're going to get into the VDOC Society coming up a bit. But I just want to start off, Bill, I'm always impressed because anytime you're there, you always open up the session, if you will. And I throw out to our audience listening and watching, when's the last time any of them said the Pledge of Allegiance? But you always insist, it's one of the first things you do, is have us stand up, hand on the heart, and we say the Pledge of Allegiance. I did it all through grade school, I think in high school some, but really not too much since then. And I want to thank you for starting every VDOC meeting with that Pledge of Allegiance.
Well, actually, it's my honor to do so. Being a veteran, spending a career in law enforcement, and still engaged in investigations, and remembering always what our Constitution means, what our country means, what that flag is a symbol of. And it's something that I feel good about when I do the pledge.
And you make the audience feel well, too, I am sure. Even some young members, some guests that come in, and what's this strange set of words we're putting together, depending how old they are and where they went to school. So it is nice to hear that. And I still have it memorized. I know, Ray, we were together last Wednesday. We usually meet on Thursdays. The last 2 months, October and November, were Wednesday meetings, whatever, at the beautiful Union League in Philadelphia. But thank you for all you've done in that regard, Bill, with the VDOC Society and everything. And Ray, if you don't mind kicking right in, what we usually do, Bill, our audience likes to know when we bring on guests, how the heck did they get to where they are today? So can you take us way back a few decades, maybe more than a few, actually?
That's a question I ask myself every day during my prayers. And I'm grateful that I was able to get where I am in life, to live as long as I have in life. And I count my blessings. I don't dwell on negativity. I was blessed to have wonderful parents, and more importantly, grandparents. We all lived in the same house, and mentors my whole life. I'll tell you a little bit about me. I was the youngest in a family of three by 5 years. My older brother is 5 years older than me. Then my sister was older than him. And I was always that pain in the neck that would try to follow him around. So pretty much I came from a busy household. My grandfather would get up and go to work at 2 o'clock in the morning. He'd get home, he'd sleep. My father worked very hard. So I was pretty much to my own devices, which weren't always very productive and weren't always very, I would say, in the normal frame of things. I didn't have any guardrails, let's say. Let me put it.
Bill, remind me, this was in Philadelphia?
Philadelphia. I grew up in...
What neighborhood?
I grew up in Winfield. You know, one of the burgs. You know the burgs? Hummelsburg, Bridesburg, and then there's Winfield. Goldberg, Greenberg, Steinberg.
Okay.
In Winfield. You get it, right?
They're not Philly neighborhoods for the record.
No, but with the burgs. They were the burgs. We had the burgs, too.
We got you.
All right. So I was a pretty... I didn't know it then, but I had attention deficit disorder. I was diagnosed by proxy years later when my son was diagnosed and put on Ritalin. I was just that little jerk in Miss Casey's class. You know, the kid in the teacher's lounge. You got him this year? Aren't you lucky? So I was heading on a track of wandering. Didn't know what direction I would take in life. So when I was 17, my birthday was in October. It was the beginning of my senior year. I hated school. My prefrontal cortex had not evolved yet fully, and I operated off my primitive brain, and I hated school. I couldn't pay attention. I felt I was dumber than the other kids, that I didn't get what they're talking about. So I had this grandiose plan to get my parents to let me quit high school. I went and saw an Army recruiter, and I got all the information. I got the paperwork, and this was my plan. I was going to come home with the papers. I was telling her, I'm joining the Army. Now, when you're 17, I just hadn't quite turned 17 yet, you need your parents' signature. So my plan is my mother would say, no, don't do it. And they acquiesce and let me quit high school. So I come home with the papers. I tell them I'm joining the Army. I need you to sign this. My mother, just as I figured, no, don't do it. Don't do it. I can't stand school. Well, maybe take off and you can, go back and get your diploma later. And my father took the papers, got up, got his coat, and my mother said, where are you going? He said, I'm going to find a notary. I outsmarted myself. So 7 days after my 17th birthday, I was taking my first time I took the oath to defend the Constitution as a soldier. 3 years in the Army. In that time, I met tremendous mentors, great first sergeants, great company commanders that molded me. I'm still friends with I was friends with all of them, but I'm still friends with my company commander. I just talked to him on Veterans Day. Every day he used to give me a word. He'd say, Fleisher. See, they never called you by your first name. It used to hurt my feelings. Fleisher. So, and he'd give me a word to learn. And they mentored me. So I knew that I wanted to finish high school. So I got my GED, and I wanted to go to college. Why? Because my guidance counselor said I wasn't college material. I wanted to show her. My second lieutenants I had to salute, who didn't know how to get out of the rain, but went to college and got ROTC. They were my inspiration that I wanted to get a degree. So I got out of the Army, and I had to take geometry and a language, which was German. I took German. But now I wanted to do it. So Temple University has a high school. Many people don't know that you can finish a whole year in one semester. So I got my geometry. I got my German. I did very well. And then they had a school night at Temple for the high school kids to go up to the college. So I went up there, and afterwards I walked up to the gentleman that was telling, the program how to get into school and all the best way. And I said, look, and I told him my story, that I was a veteran and I want to go to college. I'm afraid if I have to keep going to another year of language, I might get diverted to some other direction. So he said, all right, come see me. And I went to see him. He was in the admissions office. He waived my second year of German, which was a big deal. So another guy helped me. Wunderbar, ja, die haben gerecht. So anyway, I start college, and after a year, I saw in the newspaper, $128 a week, Philadelphia police officer, test given every day. And I said, wow, people make $128 a week. I couldn't believe it. I was in the Army, and I think I got up to $72 a month by the time I got out. And so I joined the police department, finished college, and in the police department, I had mentors that helped me to go to school. They gave me a time I needed. It got me a day job, so I could go at night. And I finally got my degree and police work. Now, if you have ADHD, not saying you do, and it's not a disability, they just knew nothing about it. There's certain jobs that are perfect for people that can't sit at a desk, have to move around, want to do everything. And I found my niche. I loved it. I loved police work. I loved being a policeman. I took the test. I made corporal. I was on detectives list. I got my degree. And lo and behold, my sergeant from when I was on the street joined the FBI. And he said, Bill, you ought to apply to the FBI. And I don't know. I like what I do. He says, do it. You do it. You're a good cop. You could do it. And I applied, and I got hired in a month. Joined the FBI.
Well, that's a story right there. But Bill, can I back you up a bit?
Yeah.
Did you work under Frank Rizzo?
Yes, I did. I knew him.
I mean, he's an iconic person in Philadelphia. Some love him, some hate him, many in the middle.
A lot of misrepresentations about him. He was fair. He was honest. They painted him out as some kind of racist, or he was not. He was just a law and order guy from South Philly.
He was a tough guy.
He was tough.
Took no nonsense from people.
But he was fair, and he took care of his cops. For example, I worked for my inspector was one of his golden hair boys, Jim Herron. You might remember that name. Retired as chief inspector, became head of the Mint Security, one of the finest men that I ever met. And I met plenty of good guys that mentored me through life. Same thing in the Bureau, I was mentored. I was just lucky that way. Why? Maybe because I worked hard. And they saw something. If you work hard and they can count on you, when they can say, look, I can give it to Fitzgerald, he'll get the job done. When you have that level of trust by your supervisors and the big bosses, that's how you have success in what your work is, whatever it may be. So I went to Boston, Detroit, and New York. I worked organized crime, all three offices.
Now we're in the FBI.
I'm in the FBI. I loved it, but I was going broke in New York just before they had cost of living. I got married. I tried to get out to a resident agency. I didn't have enough time to get to a resident agency. I get a phone call from a friend I made when I was a policeman, who was now sort of up there in customs, U.S. Customs Service. And I was in a thing.
I'm sorry, your life story is so interesting. And there's iconic people that you worked under Frank Rizzo. Yes. And if I'm looking at the dates right, you joined the FBI in 1970?
1970, November 70, I went in.
So you went from Frank Rizzo as your boss to J. Edgar Hoover.
Yes, another iconic law enforcement.
And of course, back in those days, and Ray and I came in long after his death, but every single agent, right, you had to go into FBI headquarters, line up and shake his hand. And supposedly, if he
if you had a fish handshake.
That's right. If he didn't like your handshake, and it was all men back then, of course.
Yes.
I think by the early 70s, some women came in, coincidentally.
They came in about 72, 73.
Yes. But you had that meeting with Hoover? Was that your only interaction with him?
At this point, we met his number 2 guy. I think it was Jenkins. I think it was. And here's a funny story. So we're lined up to meet him. And they
the number 2 guy in the FBI.
Alphabetical, with the idea if you had a lousy handshake or was something in your training was amiss, you may never walk out of there again as an agent. So everybody's nervous. And people are coming out. They're coming out of line. And one of a West Pointer, by the way, was in my class. I had a Annapolis guy and a West Pointer. He walked by me and he says, that guy's squirrely. Now I'm dead. Now I know I'm going to break out laughing or I'm going to do something stupid. So this is true. We go in there. This guy's a big, tall guy, and I'm average height. Maybe in the Orient, I'm average height, but I'm not too tall. And they sit you in a little hassock-like chair with the legs cut off. And this guy's towering over me at his desk, talking to me. He's looking at my papers. Good report writing's good. He's going, this is good. Oh, I see you were a Philadelphia police officer. I said, yes, sir. He said, Mr. Hoover thinks the world of Commissioner Rizzo, but he doesn't think he should run for mayor. I start to laugh. Who's he asking me? I have any say who's going to run for mayor? Well, thank God. He thought he said something funny. And he gets up and he pats you on the shoulder and says, keep up the good work. He started laughing. I was laughing out of nervous laughter.
Now, pass the audition. You passed the audition.
Passed the audition. So my first...
Bill, I have to ask you this. I have to ask you this.
Yes.
And there was a rumor that we always heard about Hoover that when agents, and I know you didn't get a chance to meet him or shake his hand, but when agents went in to shake his hand, he wasn't a big guy either. He was like our height, you and I.
Right.
So he would stand on a box.
That's what
So
I
he
heard.
looked taller than everybody. Was that true? Did you hear
I
that
don't
same
know.
thing?
You know who would know? Ed Garrity.
Oh, that's right. Eddie would know that. Yeah.
Ask him. Yeah, there
Not to ask
are all
Eddie that.
sorts of rumors. But in my book, he made a wonderful organization.
He did.
It's not the same
did.
organization as today, sadly, in my opinion. But
I agree.
You knew your job. You did your job. You were proud to be an FBI agent. I loved the work. I loved the organized crime. I got one of the first undercover assignments. Mr. Hoover didn't like it. He had passed by this time. He passed when I was in Detroit under Neil Welsh, who was another legend. And out in Detroit, and Mr. Hoover, they didn't even tell us. I'm out there doing my work with my partner, and he failed to mention. They didn't tell us on the radio. So we're going to the house to look for a witness. And we knock on the door, and the mother comes to the door. Yeah, can I help? FBI, you identified ourselves and said we'd like to talk this. Say, why are you working? Mr. Hoover's dead. I said, what?
Wow.
Where did you hear that? I thought it was one of these jokes, like before we go in the local police station to get a mugshot of this guy. And they said, what are you going to do now that Mr. Hoover's dead? I said, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. They always used to try to make jokes. We hear his stuff, things like that, So he's dead. That's when we found out. They didn't say over radio, business as usual. Then I get transferred, OP, to New York City.
Office of preference.
Yes, to New York.
You raise your hand to go to New York.
Yes. So my supervisor says, the number 2 guy was in, said, he says, you were doing good work. You got transferred. Mr. Welsh wants to make a phone call for him. So when I got to New York, I was back on I go to the organized crime division. And it was Frank Hitt, I think, said, well, where do you want to, or it may have been Baker. Where do you want to work? We have 5 divisions. We have 5 squads, 5 families, and we have a hijacking squad. And I said, well, I'm reading a lot about the Colombo and the Italian American Civil Rights League. And he said, all right, you're going to be on the Colombo squad. So I worked on the Colombo squad with Jim Marr, some great Ray Talia, a lot of famous guys, Jim Nelson in the bureau, good OC guys. And I loved the work. Then a fellow I won't mention his name, who transferred in. We were in school together. He said, "Can I stay at your old studio apartment, not far from the office, till my family moves here?" I said, "Sure." And he slept there. Snored terribly. Tommy Weber.
Tommy Weber.
Boy. So one day he says to me, "I'd like you ought to meet my sister. She's a flight attendant for TWA, and she lives here in New York. And I think you two would hit it off." So anyway, he takes me over to one night to her apartment with her roommates, and I said, "She's not for me." And I found out later, she said, "He's not for me." Anyway, we found out we didn't like each other, so we got married. That's it.
Bill, I didn't know you were Tommy Weber's brother-in-law.
Yeah. I taught him everything he knows. So a funny Tommy Weber story. I was in a little studio. I had a partition and a sofa bed, and I had a little bed behind the partition. It was like one of these Pullman, New York apartments. And he's snoring. So I turn the light on. I get up with a pillow from the couch, and I'm going to put it over his head. He opens his eyes and sees me walking towards him with a pillow, and he gets startled. I say, "You're snoring." So anyway, people come up to me. They've been married over 50 years. They come to me, how do you stay married for 50 years? And I said, well, our secret, I'll tell you the secret. Twice a week, we go out to dinner, nice, quiet restaurant, soft music, couple glasses of wine, and we come home and go to bed. She goes on Tuesdays, and I go on Thursdays.
I knew that was coming.
I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah,
I didn't see that coming.
But anyway, we've been happily married and for all this time. And she's been a terrific wife, and she knows what. We were married for about 2 months, and they send me up undercover to the Catskill Mountains with an informant, because at this time the Jewish mob was they had controlled it, the gambling and everything up there, and they were receiving intelligence that the mafia was trying to push them out. So they wanted me to go up undercover. Asked me if I'd do it. I'd work some undercover, instant cases, worked some undercover. And I went up there for the summer. So she sacrificed her first summer of marriage. I'm up there the whole summer. And then when I come into customs, she had to move and readjust in Philadelphia, as many bureau wives did, many federal agency wives do. Just like police officers, their wives had to deal with the shift work and holiday work and things of that nature. But for 3 years, I became a group supervisor.
Well, hold on, Bill. Hold on. You're so interesting, and you know these stories. So the Catskills are I don't know, about 100 miles north or so of New York City. And it's a big resort, traditionally Jewish.
And they have a racetrack up there. Yep.
There's lakes and there's entertainment,
big
comedians,
hotels, Grossinger's, Pine. But a lot of crime, but sort of gambling type crime. And this informant who was very close to he's well long gone, very close to the East Harlem crew. 114th and Pleasant Avenue. The Elliot Rayos, that particular Genovese type guys. And he'd introduced me around. And my cover was, I was a jewel thief and a burglar. This was before Donnie Brasco. And I was hiding out up there because I was hot in the city. So he would...
And let me guess, the Bureau gave you some swag to impress these people.
Yes.
Stolen watches, jewelry, and that's how they knew, or at least thought, you were this actual jewelry thief.
And they had a picture, a mugshot of me, and the RA up there would go, anybody see this guy? Anybody see this guy? A couple times to give me a legend.
Good.
And I used to hang out in a club across the racetrack. It's an interesting story. Of course, the sulkies, they had the trotters up there. And I'm in this club I used to go to, and I only drank club soda and lime. That's all. I don't drink. And my informant, it wasn't even my informant. It was actually the ASAC in the division to the SAC. His informant, old time Jewish mob guy that was associated up with Fat Tony up in East Harlem. And we're in the racetrack. And who comes walking around the corner? A crew of Colombo guys, one of whom I had locked up. He looks at me, and he sort of freezes. And I'm with the informant. I'm not worried about me. They're not going to do anything to me. That I would blow the informant's cover, He looked at me. I caught his eye, and he kept walking. He never said anything to anybody. He wasn't getting involved in this deal. Anybody whatsoever. So
very interesting.
Yeah. So then I come back, and I'm working, making some good cases, some public corruption cases, and I'm going broke. My wife gets pregnant. I still haven't figured out how. She gets pregnant, and in the airlines in those days, if you were pregnant, you couldn't fly. So she had to go on unemployment, and she had a belly like this, and they used to send her out looking for jobs, sort of like George Costanza. Looking for jobs. So I get a phone call from, like I said, from a friend of mine I had made when I was in the police department, who had moved up in customs investigations, special agent. And he always used to tease me, why don't you come to a real outfit, things like that. We all got that, from the cops or the other agencies. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, there's 2 openings in Philadelphia. I can get you one of them. I know the selecting officer. You're perfect for the job. And I said, can I think about it? He says, yes, you got till tomorrow because they're going to make the selection. So I sat down, something I was in a habit of, taking a long legal pad, like Ben Franklin, pros and cons. All the pros were I'd be home with my family, cost of living would go down about 30%, because this is before they had cost of living. My baby would be born around its grandparents. I asked him, well, I'm a GS11. I want to keep my grade. Yep, you'll keep your grade. It'd be a lateral transfer. 12 midnight, you'll be an FBI agent. 1201, you'll be a special agent with customs. And the only con I could come up with was ego. I'd no longer be a special agent with the FBI, which to me was the paramount. In fact, you had to write an essay when you went for your interview, for the initial interview where they gave you the test, and they gave you spelling tests in those days. And I had to write an essay, and why you want to be a special agent in the FBI. You ever hear Ted Gunderson? He was the ASAC. He interviewed me in Philadelphia. It was in the Widener building. And my last paragraph, to sum it up, if you're going to play baseball, you want to play with the Yankees. He liked that line. Well, I felt that way. The Bureau was the Yankees.
I'm not sure it would work today, but
today I want to play football for Kansas City.
There you go.
But anyway, I call him up. I said, I'll take the job. We have to be interviewed. I'll set it up. So I had to go down to Baltimore, and I was going to polygraph school. It was arranged that I could go to polygraph school. I could, in the Bureau, when you work organized crime, you could pick your shift, 4 to 12, day work or whatever it was, because those guys didn't come out till the sun went down. So my supervisor, I told him what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to polygraph school, and they would always send the old timers got to go down there for the 2-week course on polygraph. And he says, why don't you call this guy up? And he was a lawyer, and he was friends with Cleve Baxter School of Lie Detection. I called him up, and he told me about polygraph. He put me in touch. I got in that school. So I had started the school and took a day off when I went down for the interview. And I said they said, all right, we're going to give you the job. This Marty McDonald, who was the regional director. And I said, would it be possible to work at 4 to 12 in the New York office if I finished polygraph school? He says, I told him I was going to polygraph. He said, let me get back to you. So I'm up in New York, and I get a phone call from him. He says, we're putting you in a training status. Finish your school. I finished. It couldn't have been nicer. I moved back to Philadelphia. Michelle was still up here in the apartment because she was ready to have a baby at any moment. And the rest is history. And while I was with Customs, at that time, they only had 250 special agents in the whole country. And most of them were from other agencies. Were from Secret Service, like my supervisor, first group was from Secret Service. A guy named Bill Mayer was former FBI, a lot of former DEA guys, a lot of BATF guy, other Treasury agents. So I became a big fish in a small ocean rather than being a small fish in a big ocean. And I progressed. I got promoted to 12, 13, and I was signed to the Organized Crime and Racketeering Strike Force in Philadelphia when Joel Friedman was in charge, before they were disbanded by Dick Thornburg when he was Attorney General or Assistant Attorney General, whatever he was. So I worked there, and then they made me a group supervisor. And then I wound up in headquarters for 3 years. I had just bought my house in Jersey with my wife, and I said, I'm not going to make them suffer. I got a room with an ATF agent. I went down on Sunday nights. I came back on Friday nights to Cherry Hill, where I live now. I did that for 3 years.
And you're talking Washington, D.C., right?
Washington, D.C., in our headquarters. And again, I worked hard, and I had mentors. So one day I go to the assistant commissioner, and I said, look, I'm carrying 2 households here. I've done my 3 years. I know there's a vacancy for the deputy special agent in charge in Philadelphia. Any chance I could get it? He says, give me a memo. And he gave me a memo, and they sent me back to Philadelphia, which was very unusual because it's like when you go to headquarters, it's like billiards. You hit the ball, it bounces off the walls. You don't know what place you're going to wind up. So I took a job instead of waiting around, and I was acting division director when I left the fraud programs division. And I got back to Philadelphia, and I was, till I retired in 96. And then I went off to be a PI. That's Fleisher's life story.
I just want to touch on this, and maybe you can shed some light, because I'm going to tell you, a lot of people out there, they don't even remember that there was U.S. Customs.
Yeah, well,
they think Homeland Security.
That's what it is now. What I was in Homeland would be now Homeland Security Investigations, HSI.
What were some of the violations that U.S. Customs
We had over $1,300 of violations. Let me just close this out. What? You want solar paneling? Let me.
We can edit this part out.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries.
Ask your question again, Ray.
Let me turn the phone
Bill,
sound off.
If you could just shed a little light for our audience, exactly what is U.S. Customs? Because it doesn't exist today.
No.
Now it exists in the form of Homeland Security. So if you can go back and kind of talk about what U.S. Customs did, because that's really a jump when you go from the FBI, you go to U.S. Customs, they're working different violations, or are they not? Or are they working similar violations?
Some are parallel violations. We had over 1,300 violations and rules we enforced, investigations we conducted, currency violations, people bringing more than $10,000 or leaving with more than $10,000 in cash without declaring it, theft from interstate or foreign commerce, the theft off the piers. We handled that. Or bonded the Neutrality Act, like the IRA, weapons to the IRA. We handled internal affairs. I was on the internal affairs flying team because I was the only polygraph guy they had at the time. So I was fortunate to get in really some interesting cases around the country. Have polygraph full travel, and I had more vim and vigor in those days, and I enjoyed it. And so I got in some interesting cases like that. Some internal affairs cases, some cargo theft cases. We had a lot of fraud cases. Did a lot of fraud. People that would misclassify or undervalue merchandise they were importing, so they didn't have to pay the full duties. These tariffs you hear about.
Mm-hmm.
Then you had steel trigger price, which is very complicated. There was a certain price of steel that you couldn't, if it would hurt the industry in the States, the steel are what's left of, we don't know, we have a steel industry out Pittsburgh and some of these other places, in the Rust Belt where they did steel. You had cases where they call them dumping. A country like in Japan was a big case where we have a 5-year plan in our thinking. They had a whole department that thought 20 years ahead in Japan. What will this market be like in 20 years? And they would assist, let's say TVs was the big thing. If they sold something to us to be imported here, exported to us, if it was cheaper than the price of the market price for it is in Japan, it was called dumping. Let's say you bought a TV in Japan, it was $500. But they would sell it to us for $250. That would be considered dumping. And there were dumping violations. And all these very intricate customs type investigations. It was interesting. We had smuggling cases, dope smuggling cases. We had one of the biggest at the time. Cocaine, 10,000 pounds of cocaine was smuggled into Philadelphia via the cartel that was eventually sent up to New York. We tracked it. We arrested everybody, seized the 10,000 pounds. It was hidden in big drums of Drano, sodium hydroxide, and we found it and we let it get out and we traced it all the way up there. Cases like that. So they were interesting cases. They were fun cases. And
what were some of the other cases and some of the compartments that they would hide things in coming in from different countries?
You
like
name
smuggling in different things.
You name it, Ray. they were limited only by their imagination. They would hide it. We had beautiful bust heroin come in to Philadelphia. They were like metal, stuffed with heroin, sealed at the bottom. We had a few good heroin cases here. We had marijuana smuggled in barrels of molasses, plywood, between the plywood. That was in Delaware, that case. Do you remember that case? And when we raided them, as they were unloading it, they had rented one of these rented storage, and they're opening the cans. And we come in, as the raid, they were trying to run away, and their shoes were coming off because they were standing in molasses. They dripped down the cans. So they're running. They couldn't get. We got them all.
That's great.
Cases like that. Trying to think of. We've had a lot of interest. IRA cases, exporting of weapons, to the provisional IRA. Generally, that would be the things. But fraud, misclassifying something. I had a big case. Here's one. They were importing wood, metal lathes. But the duty on metal lathes and the value were, let's say, it was 4 or 5%. They were classifying them. They're saying they were wood cutting lathes, where there was no duty on it, but they were metal cutting lathes. So the inspectors picked up on. We had an investigation. We wound up indicting these people. And when I was interviewing beforehand, he said, "Well, you can cut wood with a metal lathe." I said, "Yeah, and you can use this phone as a paperweight, but it has to be what it was designed for. Is how you classify it. It wasn't designed to cut metal. You're bringing those lathes in; they're designed to cut metal." And then we had the first case. The first. I had a friend in narcotics. He was the lieutenant of narcotics. And he calls me up on the phone. He says, "Bill, are you interested in counterfeit computers?" He says, and I knew the 80 cop. He said he was in buying some marijuana, and the guy had all over the place computers. He said they're Apple knockoffs. He told him, and he let him have one for like $100. This is when 8 bytes was considered. Wow, eight bytes. Wow. I said, "Sure, we're interested." So we made an undercover buy. We wound up seizing a warehouse. They were counterfeit. They used counterfeit motherboards. They were counterfeiting the ROM. They were hiding stuff in equipment from Taiwan inside other importations, and we got them all. So yeah, cases like that are interesting.
Yeah, it sounds it. It really does. It really does sound interesting. I find it fascinating that they try and bring stuff in through different means and how they were able to get things in. So if I were to ask you, I would say, Bill, what is, in your estimation, through all your time in customs and in the Bureau, that you saw something come in that you said, "Holy shit, I can't believe that they were able to get that in here," or attempted to get that in there in that way? That's really somebody thinking outside the box.
Well,
and it could be body parts too, Bill.
Yeah.
Yes. There could be anything. Certain flights were famous for certain things, smuggling in certain things like agriculture. You get that from the islands. You get that from Colombia, the drugs. I trained down at Glencoe people in behavioral analysis for drug smugglers, swallowers. And that was probably the most unique way they were getting heroin in or cocaine in. It would be they'd wrap them up in condoms. They'd seal them up, and then they'd take a little bit of mineral oil, swallow it, and foul up a little Coca-Cola. And they might have 10, 12 pellets full of this stuff in, about half a kilo or a quarter of a kilo per person, mules. So I was training people how to identify them, made some video training, went down to Glencoe, and that would be the most interesting, the internal carries. They used these mules. They'd pay them something that was, I think my dogs are trying to break in here. Yep. If you see 2 dogs jump up on my lap, call the cops. Or you got to call the dog catchers. All right. So anyway,
in those type of cases, was it the rookie customs agents that had to sit with the guy overnight, these mules,
yes,
and wait until they, shall we say, made the deposit?
yeah, that's how they would take them to the hospital. Now they have X-ray machines right at the the ports of entry. In this particular, we call it the SWAT team.
SWAT team.
The SWAT team.
I like that.
They
They
had to stay with them. And we had one case where the person had the blanket up here over his mouth, and as he was expelling him, he was re-swallowing him. And the agent was sitting there, and he just got suspicious and caught him in the act. Now, you got to be pretty desperate to do something like that. And then there was always the risk of the bag breaking, the condom breaking, and then dying.
Yes.
So we had one on Thanksgiving. We had here in Philadelphia. I'm off. I'm the deputy SAC. I get a call, and I always like to show the flag whenever the guys are out on something, a surveillance, or they're planting we used to plant bugs or trackers on cars, court ordered. I would go out with them. You know, A, I liked it. B, I always wanted to show them that I get a call at home, a swallower, and we're taking them from the airport to Mercy Douglas, I think, not far from the airport. Is it Mercy Douglas? Anyway. So I go down there, and sure enough, they had this heroin on Thanksgiving to show the flag. And that would be the most unusual, those internals. Now, we had them with condoms, in females using their body parts to hide them. And someday I show you a film we made that showed all these things. I have a copy of it still.
I'd love to see that. A condom breaking is never a good thing, certainly if it's full of heroin or cocaine.
It's never a good thing.
It's going through your intestinal tract. Yeah.
Never. In any case.
That's what I thought you meant.
Except when you're 15 years old, 14, you're dropping out of hotel windows on people full of water.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
You were playing cards. Friends when it happened, right? They'll swear to it.
On this pleasant condom note, we have so much we want to get into with you, Bill, about the founding of the Vidocq Society, sure. The boy in the box going back to the 1950s. Just solved about a year ago.
Yeah.
And Bill, you are a key fundamental reason that case was solved, or certainly he was identified.
Teamwork. Nothing in life is done without teamwork.
Mr. Humble, and I appreciate you that way.
Reminds me of a famous story. I'll give you a quick story. After the 6-Day War, Golda Meir they were sitting around a table, and somebody said what a great job that Moshe Dayan did. And he starts going into his, it's no big thing, it's teamwork, it's my soldiers, IDF. And Golda Meir says to him, don't be so humble, you're not that great.
On that pleasant note,
yes,
from three humble guys out there, Bill, would you come around back for our next episode?
Yes, I would be delighted.
Okay, so everyone, we're going to say goodbye now. Ray, any closing words here? And we're going to come back with Bill.
I can't wait for part 2.
Same here. Everyone, thanks again for listening to this episode of Cold Red. Check us out on coldredpodcast.com. Like us, subscribe to us, YouTube, all the different places you can see us. Thanks to Rick Schilling, our music coordinator, Matt McLaughlin, and Matt Robinson, our producers. And everybody, until next time, stay safe, be aware of your surroundings. It may just save your life. And check us out shortly with part 2 of our episode with Bill Fleisher. Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining us.